Well, we need to prepare for war between the United States and Venezuela because, according to reports, President Trump wants to ensure that Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro is out before President Trump leaves office for his second term. That means we have about 3 years left. This is why right now we are seeing a lot of pressure on Venezuela. Look at this. It says state-of-the-art warship steaming for Venezuela to turn the tide in Trump's war on drugs. What we've seen is that the United States is trying to pressure Venezuela and their leader to just step down. President Trump has made it very clear, if we see any boats headed from Venezuela to the United States, and there is even a thought that there's drugs on them, he's going to shoot them out of the water, which is essentially what he's been doing. Look at this. It says right here, the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford may be the Navy's newest carrier, but it hasn't shied away from conflict since its first full-length deployment in 2023. That year, the Ford originally departed for a deployment into Europe in May, but eventually spent the tail end of its eastern Mediterranean after Hamas's initial October 7, 2023 attack on Israel. You may remember that the USS Gerald R. Ford went over and pretty much sat there because of all the conflicts that were going on between Israel and Hamas, between Israel and the Yemen Houthis were attacking ships through the Red Sea. There are so many conflicts, okay? But this ship is now headed towards Venezuela, okay? It's going to sit there in the Caribbean. I want to show you something else. We're learning of more reports, of more issues that have pretty much arisen during the past several years. But look at this, okay? I want to show you something. It says how U.S. plot nearly captured Venezuela's Maduro. According to reports, there was a plot for the United States to get a hold of Maduro. I want to read this to you. It says U.S. federal agent attempted to bribe Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro's chief pilot to divert the leader's plane for capture in a covert operation spanning 16 months. Okay, now here's what's interesting about this. We now know about it, which means it didn't happen. It didn't actually go down the way the United States wanted it to. This is why it matters. It says the U.S. has recently combined covert operations with a growing military presence to pressure Maduro, whom Washington blames for drug trafficking. Warships, attack aircraft, and intelligence assets have been deployed to the Caribbean to target suspected narco smuggling boats, signaling readiness for more aggressive action. We have sent everything down to the Caribbean, okay, to ensure that these narco terrorists do not make their way into the United States. Now, why is this such a big deal? Why is President Trump shooting these boats out of the water? Well, here's the reason why. Is he concerned about the drugs making their way into the United States? Yes, absolutely. But is that his biggest concern? According to reports, no. That the reason why President Trump continues to shoot these boats out of the water is because every single time he is pretty much getting rid of the drugs. They aren't making their way into the U.S., which is now starting to put a somewhat of a ding on Maduro's business, meaning he's not making as much money. This is also the reason why the United States stopped doing business with Venezuela. But with the United States potentially seeing additional conflicts with Russia and with China, the concern right now is how can we ensure that the American people are not paying more for things like food and for utilities? Well, we have to have more gas, which means we need more oil. Venezuela has the largest oil reserve in the world. I think it's like 300 billion barrels or something like that. It's a massive, massive oil reserve. And so, according to reports, President Trump wants that. He wants control of that, which means Maduro has to leave office. He can't be there. Okay? He needs a regime change. Well, this is why we're at this specific situation. If the United States pretty much blocks all drugs from making their way into the U.S. from Venezuela, guess what happens? It hurts Maduro's business, meaning he doesn't have as much money, which means he loses some of his power. Okay, this is going to take a little bit. But again, this is where we're at. Well, here's the problem that happened this past weekend. It says heavy Russian cargo plane lands in Caracas amid U.S.-Venezuela tensions. Why is a Russian cargo plane going to Venezuela? Well, that's a problem. Let's read. It says a Russian transport aircraft of a type linked to the country's military and former Wagner mercenary group has landed in the Venezuelan capital over the weekend, signaling heightened Russian interest in the Latin American community. Guess what? Or Latin American country. Guess what? If the United States wants Venezuela and Russia wants Venezuela or wants to help Venezuela, guess what? Now we have a larger conflict. Now we have an issue that the Trump administration has to get under control quickly. We cannot wait. We cannot just dabble with this, this conflict between the United States and Venezuela, because essentially Russia could come on board and help, which essentially is what they're doing. Look at this right here. It says the Ilyushin Tu-76 transport aircraft with the registration RA-78765 arrived in Caracas on Sunday after a 2-day journey that took it from Russia via Armenia, Algeria, Morocco, Senegal, and Mauritania to Latin America, flight records show. It appears the aircraft embarked on its trip from the airport to the greater Moscow area, with the transponder signal first being picked up shortly after takeoff. Okay, it says right here, the multi-stop journey is emblematic of the circuitous routes used to avoid Western airspace or possible cargo inspections in unfriendly countries. It is also possible that deliveries or pickups were made along the way. Again, we don't know. We have no clue, but why was this 50-ton cargo plane landing in Venezuela? That's the concern that right now we don't know. And on top of all that, CIA intelligence doesn't have anything to report. And all this is happening while Venezuela's creaking military prepares for U.S. strikes. According to reports out of Venezuela, they are ready to strike. They are ready to fight if the United States does hit Venezuela. And according to reports, President Trump is ready. He is ready to strike Venezuela. He's just waiting for all information to come through. Now, look at this. It says CIA counterattacks cyber attacks targeting the Maduro regime didn't satisfy Trump in his first term. Now the U.S. is flexing its military might. Like I said, the United States is trying to do whatever it can to ensure that Maduro's regime doesn't last past President Trump's second term. They want to ensure that this gets handled in the next 3 years. Meaning, we are likely going to see an escalation of war. What it looks like, how the United States does decide to attack Venezuela, again, I don't know. But what I can tell you is that what the United States is doing and what the Trump administration has already planned and putting all this military equipment in the Caribbean, that right there shows we are close. We've heard for the past 3 weeks that it was going to be between 2 to 3 weeks before the United States actually were to strike Venezuela or specific stash houses. But it's been that 3 weeks. Right now, it could happen in the next several days, according to reports. But again, I just wanted to share that with you because if the United States does strike Venezuela, it is going to create additional conflicts here in the region. So just keep that in mind, because that right there could cause gas prices to spike, meaning all food costs will go up, utility bills going to become a little bit more expensive, especially during these winter months. So I'll leave you with that, but that's what we know as of today. So again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.